Symbols are important to our society. You think about symbols, you think about things, symbols are important to our society. I remember back in 1989, what's that? You were 1 year old. Thank you, Cody. I remember back in 1989 how hard President Reagan fought to get the Berlin Wall torn down. Do you remember that? How hard he fought? The Berlin Wall, for those of you that were 1 year old or weren't even born yet, Nathan, or maybe haven't studied about it in history. The Berlin Wall separated two regimes and authorities. It represented and epitomized a different philosophy and ideology that separated a people that needed to come together. And they needed to be connected. It became a symbol. And there was a famous statement that President Reagan said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall." The tearing down of that wall. He tore it, the wall came down. It was a symbol of the unifying of ideals and the covenant between people. The American flag, long may she wave. But it represents our freedom and our commitment to democracy, which was in its embryonic stages when our country was founded and not particularly popular. But it grew in its popularity as we proved and developed democracy. Now, Cody, I just want you to know I wasn't around when it first started flying, okay? Pastor Watts was, but I wasn't around when, because he says, he's really old. He's older than dirt, So anyway, it grew in its popularity as we proved and developed democracy. Even though hundreds of years have now passed, the waving of the flag still reminds us of the price and the blood that was shed so that we can have the right to have democracy, a government that is for the people, by the people. Many other countries around the world have adopted this ideology, though at the beginning it was quite controversial. Symbols remind us of where we came from, days gone by, of memories of moments frozen in time that have impacted us in significant ways. Symbolism is a powerful thing, and I pray that we never get away from symbolism. There are many women and men in this room who have rings on their fingers, and that ring has become a symbol. It was bought with a price. Somebody paid for it to say that I love you. I love you enough to put a symbol, a sign on it, all to say that this moment, this day, this second, you become mine and I become yours. And it becomes a symbol, a reminder that you look back on and reflect upon it and recognize the depth to which you entered into a covenant with another human being. It is a priceless symbol, much more than what you paid for the ring. It costs a whole lot more than what you paid for the ring through time. Years go by, and you begin to pay a whole lot more than what you paid for the ring. And more for the marriage, and the ring becomes a symbol of a price greater paid. Symbols are absolutely important. In the Bible, we see over and over symbols. God himself uses symbols. After he destroyed the earth with flooding and water, and all types of lives perished in the flood, and so 8 souls were saved through the ark, God then puts a symbol of the covenant in the sky that says, I will no longer destroy the earth by water. God then gives us a symbol that we call some of you are awake, rainbow. One of the most beautiful things that we were able to see when we were in Hawaii, when I wasn't losing my whatever dinner I had left in my stomach over the side of the boat, was we were on a dinner cruise on a catamaran up the Nepali coast, and it had been raining. And on our way back in, the sun came out, and there was a double rainbow in the sky. And it was just gorgeous. And we sailed right underneath of it. Just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I think the captain played Somewhere Over the Rainbow over the speakers. Yeah, what a schmooze. He painted it in the sky to remind us that he's entered into a covenant, that whatever we go through, it will not be that way again. Because God is a God of symbols. He uses symbols for all sorts of things, reminders also for power. I think of the children of Israel when they were in the wilderness. There were serpents in the camp. You remember the story? There were serpents in the camps, and they were all being bit, and they were dying, and they were complaining to Moses. And God told Moses to lift up a serpent. And as long as they looked at the serpent, which was a symbol of healing, they were healed from their diseases. Christ looked at the symbol of the serpent being lifted up and used it as a metaphor to describe the cross, and said, even as Moses lifted up the serpent, so shall the Son of Man be lifted up. And they hung him high and stretched him wide on a cross. And for my sin and yours, he died. And even though he's not there on the cross anymore, every time we see the cross, it remains a symbol of the price he paid, of the debt that was paid by the shedding of his blood for our sins. Symbols. Symbols. Traditions that mean something. Sometimes they don't mean anything to anybody else, but they mean something to you. Even families ought to have traditions and symbols that mean something. Every year at Christmas time growing up, my mom makes this frozen salad. It is the most delicious thing on this earth. The most delicious thing on this earth. When we moved to South Carolina, I told my wife she had to get the recipe and learn how to make it. And she does pretty good at making it. But there is just something extra special about the way my mother makes. I don't know whether she spits in the mixture or what she does, but there is just something extra special about the way she makes her frozen salad. And it just is, it's the same way with her potato salad. I don't know what it is. Dad has tried to make her potato salad, and it doesn't taste the same as Mom's. I don't know what it is. It's just it's the way it is. There's some, I know I'm in double trouble. It's just the way it is. There are some things that just remind us. They're just traditions. There are certain kinds of foods that are symbolic of where we came from, of where I came from, for instance. On vacation, I have to have scrapple. Y'all know what scrapple is? All the leftovers of the pig, pushed together in this loaf and you cut it up and you, okay? Scrapple. It tastes good. It's wonderful. It's delicious. But there's a certain kind that you have to get, isn't there? You can get all kinds of substitutes, and that's what you get here in Central Ohio, because you can't get this certain kind here in Central Ohio. You can only get it on the East Coast. It's Rappa Scrapple. And on vacation, they sell Rappa Scrapple at Food Lion at Cape Hatteras. And we buy the store out. They know when the Wattses come to Hatteras because they can't keep it on the shelf. And we actually fight over, the families fight over who gets to the store first. Because if one family gets to the store, the other family doesn't get any. Because you can't get it here. But when I get it, it reminds me, I have the memory of being at my grandmother's house, cooking it, and I can still see her in her red recliner, watching the news, drinking her coffee every morning. It's a symbol. It's a symbol. It's a symbol. Sometimes they seem foolish to anyone else, but they are a symbol of how I got over, how my soul got over, how God helps you get over things. You pull out that box of memories and you realize just how blessed you really are. You see the good days and you see the bad days. And when you're going through the bad days, you pull out that box of memories and you realize just how good God really is. How blessed you really have been. How He has brought you through all of these things and all of these situations, and how He has lifted you up and encouraged you, and you can then face what you're facing right now because of the memories, the symbols that are there. So this morning I want to talk to you about a symbol, and I just happened to bring one with me. It's not particularly valuable to anybody who doesn't know what it represents. It's just a rag. It's just a symbol. You might not recognize the value of this rag, but this rag is a symbol. Because a symbol is personal. It means something to the individual. Some things there are some things that we own that we can get insurance on because you can go buy another one if it breaks or it goes away. But there are some things that you have that are priceless because you cannot buy the memory of what they represent. This is just a symbol. Because it doesn't mean anything to anybody else, and you're probably wondering, what in the world am I going to do preaching on a rag? I haven't even quoted a scripture yet. And here I am preaching on a rag. A rag. Rag is a symbol. There's a lot of things you can do with a rag. You know, I could be preaching on the milk rags that they used to wrap Jesus up with. When He was born in a manger, I could use the rag to talk about how they wrapped Him up. You call them swaddling clothes, but swaddling clothes were the milk rags, where they sopped up the milk from milking the cows, and they wrapped Jesus up in the milk rags, knowing that we would desire the sincere milk of the Word. They wrapped Him up in the milk rags and the milk that God sent from heaven to feed us until we want no more. I could talk about that. But this morning, I want to use this symbol, and the only person who knows what it really means, what this really means, isn't here today. So I want to speak on his behalf, because this symbol means something to David. It is a representation of his journey and his life and his struggling. This rag, this old rag. This doesn't go with what I have on. Doesn't match anything that I have on. Doesn't fit into where I am right now. It's where I came from, where David came from. It's the rag of a shepherd boy. A shepherd boy is not a member of the upper class. He basically is a field hand. His daddy worked out in the field, and he was a boy in the house. And a shepherd boy, half of the time, had no wages and would work for food. David was a shepherd boy out there trying to take care of the sheep and didn't have anything to work with. And a lion came up against him. He took the rag and he said, "This is the kind of stuff that this is the kind of stuff that you make to fight back when you don't have anything else to fight back with." Have you ever gotten into a fight and you didn't have anything to fight with? And you took what you had and you said, "Such as I have, I'm not going to let you take my stuff, my job, my opportunity, my life, my family's legacy. You're after my family's legacy. I'm not going to let you do it. And even though I don't have anything fancy to fight with, like a degree or $1 million or a bunch of friends, but I'm going to roll up what I got and I'm going to throw it at you." He killed a lion. And he killed a bear with what he had. With what he had. And a rag. Dirty rag. Throwing rocks at everything that had ever come against him. You live long enough, a lot of stuff will come against you. You have to throw what you have at it. You can't throw what you wish you had. You can't throw what your neighbor had. You have to throw what you have at it. That's what separates the men from the boys. Because you have to throw what you have at it. Don't tell me that you want something if you're not willing to throw what you have at it. Don't even get up to preach if you're not going to throw what you have at it. Don't even get up to sing if you're not going to throw what you have got at it. Don't even get up to teach if you're not going to throw what you've got at it. Don't expect me to get excited in the spirit if you don't throw what you've got at it. You've got to throw what you've got at it. This rag represents him throwing what he had at it. Has a little resume on it. See, I killed the lion, killed the bear, everything that ever tried to steal what was trying to take care of, what I was trying to take care of, he killed. It represents what he killed. Didn't cost anything, but it'll bring you down. If the lion could have talked at David, he would have laughed at him. "What you got, boy? That all you got? Just a rag?" Yeah, but it worked. Have you ever had a victory with something that didn't make sense, but it worked? It didn't even make sense that a girl like you would be in a position that you have right now, but it worked. It didn't even make sense that a guy like you who came from the background that you came from would be sitting where you're sitting right now, but it worked. If God took something that wasn't much of nothing and blessed you with it anyway, that's something to praise the Lord about. Isn't it? Oh, they laughed at me, but it worked. They talked about me, but it worked. They turned up their nose at me, but it worked. They tried to get my job, but this worked. They said I wasn't qualified, but it worked. They said I was ugly, but it worked. They said I was stupid, but it worked. They said I'd never get here, but it worked. It worked. What I had, it worked. So I was thinking about this rag. Because this rag follows David all the way down to Goliath. The biggest thing he ever had to fight in his life. This symbol. And somebody in here is fighting the biggest thing you ever had to fight in your life. It may not be a Goliath that we can see. It might be a Goliath called cancer. Might be a Goliath of an unexpected, shocking divorce. Goliath comes in all kinds of forms. And whenever you have something in front of you like you've never seen before, always use what you have behind you. That was a good shouting spot right there, by the way. Always use what you had behind you. When the enemy is in front of you and he's bigger than anything you had ever had to face before, don't try something new. Go back and get something that works. They tried to give David something new. You know, when you're scared and you start talking to carnal people about spiritual warfare, their advice will mess you up. They were trying to get him to fight in Saul's armor. You have to be careful who you get advice from. The Bible says in Psalm 1, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful." Ungodly people will give you bad advice. Some of you are in trouble right now because you got bad advice. Bad advice will make you fake who you really are. Bad advice will make you not have confidence in yourself. Bad advice will make you act like somebody you are not. Good advice will say, "I am that I am." Anybody in here have good advice? You learn to stop being phony. You learn to stop faking it. You learn to stop pretending to be something that you're not. That when all hell breaks loose, it might be shabby, it might be raggedy, but I'll tear you up with it. And the giant will come down. And he took what he had. He took the symbol, the rag, and he killed Goliath with it. And he hit him in the head with the rock. Brought him down to his size. David was a boy. Goliath was a giant. And he took the symbol, the rags of his life, and he said, "I'll bring you down to my size. I might not have what you have. I might not look like you look. I might not do what you do. But if you'll let me use what I know, I'll knock you down to my size. I'll bring you down to where I can handle you. I'll take your sword from you and cut your head off with your own stuff." And where he walks away from, here he walks away from it with a rag. An old, dirty rag. Same old rag he had used before. It brought him to where he is now. And knowing how to use this rag is what changed his life. If you learn how to use what life handed you, instead of whining about it, complaining about it, fussing about it, medicating about it, and going through trauma about it, if you'll just take the fight and say, yes, I came from a single parent home, but I'm learning how to work that thing. I'm going to learn how to work that thing. Yes, I came from the wrong side of the tracks, but I learned how to work that thing. If you'll back up and let me work it, I came here on the rags of life. I'm just a raggedy woman sitting here. I'm just a raggedy man sitting here, but I made it with this, that, and the other. Took not enough and made it work for me. Took it and made it work for me. I know I look good right now, but you don't understand. Underneath all this stuff is a bunch of rags. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of the other. And I want to know this morning, are there any raggedy people in here? You may be hating me now, but I'm raggedy. I came in here on rags. That's why I learned how to not have you. Yeah, because I made it on rags. I'm used to making it do. You don't need me. I'm cool with it. I'm used to it. I can make it by myself. That's what you can say to the world. You don't need me. I'm all right with that. I'm all right with that. I can make do with that. Raggedy people are tough. They're strong. They're relentless. They've cried themselves to sleep more than once. You hear them at night and you think they won't go to work in the morning. But early in the morning you hear their alarm because we're back in the fight again. I came here this morning with nothing but rags. Just the old stuff I've been through. And the Bible said that God brought David to the palace through his ability to work his rag. Have you ever had God bring you into something through amazing? Into something amazing through something crazy? And you can't even explain how a person like you ended up in a situation like that? I mean, think about it. And here you are in a whole new world that doesn't fit your background or where you came from, and it doesn't make any sense at all. And if anybody knew where you came from, they wouldn't believe where you are right now. But those old rags brought you all the way to what I like to call is such a time as this. Have you ever had the rags bring you to such a time as this? Look at me. After all these years, I can get my hair done. I had to do it myself. I had to pin up my skirt, pull up my pants. But look what the Lord has done. He's healed my body. He saved my soul. He changed my life. He picked me up, turned me around, and made me whole. You wouldn't believe where I came from. So stop asking me for my testimony, because you couldn't handle my testimony. If I told you what God did in my life, you wouldn't even know what to say or what to do, because every time the devil comes up in your face, just shake your rag. Look at what I've been through. Look where I came from. Look how I made it through with the Lord on my side. I was raped, but I made it through. I was abused, and I made it. I was hurt, and I made it. I was broke, and I made it. I was sick, and I made it. I was sad setbacks, and I made it. I was lied on, and I made it. I was hexed, but I made it. I was cursed, but I made it. To God be the glory. Great things He has done. This is a symbol. This is a sign. When you see this, get out of my way. So, I thought I'd talk about this symbol this morning. And talk about from rags to riches. Don't jump ahead. Robert just stood up and praised the Lord. Growing up, we used to go to the boardwalk, Rehoboth Beach, in southern Delaware. And every now and then, it was rare, But every now and then, we were allowed to play the games that were there, the arcade games. They gave you the little tickets. If you got so many tickets, you could trade them in to get things, to get the bear. Those tickets were tokens. You could trade them in. It wasn't money, but they were symbols. They were tickets, and didn't know that when I picked up this rag, it was going to be a symbol. It was going to be a token. It was going to be a voucher that would bring me into another dimension. That's what I want to share with you this morning. I want to tell you what to do with what you have left. I want to tell you that everything that you went through was a voucher. Everything you've been through is a voucher. It's a symbol. It was a sign. So let's look at 1 Samuel 18, starting at verse 2. And verse 2 is all the further we're going to get. But I encourage you to read down 2 through 5, all right? At some point. But verse 2 is all we're going to get to. All right? And Saul took him that day and would not let him go no more home to his father's house. He's talking about David. David, when you think about it, David didn't want to go home anyway. They didn't even like him at his father's house. The house was raggedy anyhow. You're going no more back to your father's house. Sometimes we'll get you out of what you didn't want to be in anyway. Saul decreed that you won't go back to that raggedy house. Who would want to be in that raggedy house anyhow? I stayed out in the field most of the time just to stay away from that old raggedy house. They didn't like me anyway. 8th son of Jesse, misfit, questionable origin. I was mama's baby, daddy's maybe. History says that there was some question in Jesse's mind as to whether David was really his son. Some would say that's why David said, in sin I was born, and in sin did my mother conceive me. You can read about it in Psalm 51:5. It might have had a double-edged meaning. That's why Jesse didn't call him to the house when Samuel came to anoint the next king. Didn't call him there as one of his sons. Because David came from a raggedy situation. You ever had a little background situation that you couldn't tell anybody about because you thought, I might be talking about a little raggedy situation? Little raggedy jackleg situation? Those things that you just want to keep secret? Those things. He was the 8th son of Jesse with a background. And all my life I had to fight. You see something happen, and the raggedy boy from the raggedy background took a raggedy weapon and fought his way to the palace and drew a line in the sand and said, you shall go no more back to the raggedy house. You need to know this morning, that you can leave that raggedy house this morning. You can stand and say, you shall go no more back to your raggedy house. Oh, now that was a shouting spot too. I don't know who needed that this morning. I don't know what you had to come from to get where you are right now. But I want you to know that this Sunday can close the deal. You will go no more back to that raggedy situation. Let me say it this way. The enemies that you see today, you shall see them never again. You can turn to your neighbor, you can turn to the devil, and you can say, I'm out of here. You can tell depression, I'm out of here. You can tell discouragement, I'm out of here. You can tell anxiety, I'm out of here. You can tell confusion, I'm out of here. You can tell sin, I'm out of here. You shall go no more back to your father's house. You can tell all of them off this morning. I'm out of here. No more, no more, no more, no more. You ought to underline that sentence, highlight it if you're using an electronic device. You ought to underline it, highlight it, copy it, paste it, print it, put it all over your house, all over your car, all over your cubicle. You shall go no more back to your old raggedy house. Post it on Facebook, email it, text it to all of your friends, put it everywhere. You shall go no more back to your father's house. I'm not going back to what was normal for me. It used to be normal, but it isn't for me anymore. It used to be how I coped with stuff, but I'm not coping with it that way anymore. I'm not going back to my father's house anymore. I'm not going back to my family's curses anymore. Just because they went to hell doesn't mean that I'm going to hell. I'm not going back to my daddy's house anymore. Tell daddy I'm leaving and I'm not coming back. How about you this morning? Are you going back or are you leaving? That raggedy house. Because you're being called to the palace. Oh, there's a great promise if you go on. There's a great promise if you go on. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, gave it to David and his garments, even to his sword and to his bow and to his girdle. This raggedy boy was in the palace, had no training, nothing to wear, just rags. Stood out like a sore thumb. And the prince, there's a symbol there, isn't there? And the prince made a covenant with him, fell in love with him. They became friends, not just friends, best friends, like brothers. And Jonathan looked at David and said, you know what? You can't look that way. And he took off all of his clothes and gave the royal clothes to David. And David exchanged his rags for the royal clothes to come into the palace. No training, no clothing, because he came from the field. He came from the raggedy house. But he took what he had that got him to the palace. Take what you've got this morning. God takes you just as you are. He takes you just as you are. Jesus, the Prince of Peace, took off his royal robe, became a man, was stripped naked, was crucified, so that you today can put on royal robes. You see, in the palace, we're out of place. In the rags of our lives. Because we come from the raggedy house. With our raggedy clothes. And our raggedy lives. But the King has decreed, you shall go no more back to your raggedy house. And the prince says, here. Not only the robe, but also the sword, weapons, what we need to fight, to deal with the spiritual warfare, everything that we need. And he says, come on. Come on in. You're home now. That's how you can tell the enemy, I'm not going back. Will you? Let's stand together.